Okay, I'm going to continue doing some sketches and line work for one of my other projects. So I've already started some sketches. I have one more that I want to fill this space in with here, and then when that one's finished I will begin inking from top to bottom. These little sketches will be used in the Dinosaur Child book, children's picture book, and they will also be available as stickers eventually when they're finished. Each of the characters that I'm drawing has little quirks to match their species or the name that they have. So Andy and Anna are ankylosaurs, and they're quite clumsy. And Stacy is a styracosaurus. She likes to sleep a lot. She's quite lazy. And Spencer's a Spinosaurus, and he's obsessed with anything with fish in it. So you can see there's examples there. There's another one that I put up a while ago, which is of a Carcharodontosaurus called Carol. And because the word car is in not only her name for Carol, it's also in Carchara, or Carcharo, I thought it would be quite funny to make her obsessed with cars. Not in driving them, but if, like a dog, when a car comes by, she can't not chase it. So I did have a little bit of fun playing around with that concept. I do admit most of the sketches that I've done so far are of carnivores, but I am doing a herb one now. There is a fair balance of the characters in their species and their gender, so it's like this dinosaur that I'm trying to do at the moment is an iguanodon, but I haven't exactly given them a name yet, so they have no gender yet. They're just going to be a generic little iguanodon. Now when I do my sketches, I usually start with the head and then mark out roughly the body, and then I start to do the details. So I could also have done a bit more positioning for the feet or the legs. I usually do this, but sometimes I like to start with a few details as well, just so that I have a rough idea of how big I'm drawing certain pieces. So it's like her head's quite large, so I had to make her body a little bit more bulky. Because before I drew her quite narrow, or you know him, I'm going to go for her for now. I drew them quite narrow-waisted, so I'm going to make them a little bit fatter. And this also gives you the illusion as well that they're quite young, because most of these dinosaurs in the books are children, juveniles. I think there's about 3 of the characters who are classed as adults. Archie the Archaeopteryx, who's displayed at the moment on the top right, he is technically a full-grown Archaeopteryx, so he's probably one of the few characters who are an adult. So we've got Spencer. I'd probably class him as a juvenile, teenager maybe, because I didn't draw his sail full size. I imagine when he became an adult, the sail would be a lot bigger. So he's technically a juvenile. Alan, the Allosaurus, is just a baby, so he's very tiny. Diana the Dilophosaurus, I've still not decided whether she's a child or a teenager. Whereas Stacy, Andy, and Anna, they're both classed as children. So, but this iguanodon that I'm currently working on, I haven't fully decided yet what role they will play or how old they will be. But all these sketches are being drawn so that the characters look young, because Archie, when he mentions his friends and other dinosaurs that he knows, the little thought bubbles that appear over his head depicts them all as children because they all behave childish. It doesn't matter how old they are. And for those who aren't familiar with the works of Dinosaur, which is the name of the project, it's available on my website and basically covers most of the 3 tiers of time period, as all the dinosaurs live in a kind of Jurassic Park style zoo set in modern times, and Archie is a exhibit which is allowed free roam pretty much. He's a bit of a tourist guide, so a zookeeper will take him around as an example of bird-like dinosaurs, and he's got pretty much free reign of where he goes, which is why he's able to meet some of these other dinosaurs and interact with them. So he'll either stand outside of their enclosure and talk to them, or he'll actually get in the enclosures with them. So if he's never met a dinosaur species before, like in the case of Donnie the T-Rex and his brother Bluth, he never met the 2 dinosaurs before, he's never seen a T-Rex before, so he's naturally curious. And while he can't read, most of the exhibits have displays outside, so he's able to see, oh, there's a new dinosaur in here, what does it look like? Oh, I've never seen this one before, is it dangerous? Well, I can't read that it says it's a carnivore, I'm going to just go in and see what's what. So naturally all the new dinosaurs that enter are a child or baby, so he's quite safe in terms of size, unless I'd say they were a juvenile. If there was a juvenile T-Rex in there, they would already be established as being quite predatory, whereas when he meets Donnie and Bluth, they are babies / children, they're still learning, so they're not as much of a threat at that point. So he basically will go in and meet new dinosaurs in their enclosures or outside. So he knows that Spencer the Spinosaurus likes to eat fish, that he won't get eaten by him, so he usually goes inside his enclosure. Whereas Diana the Dilophosaurus, as friendly as she might seem, she does make it quite clear that her smaller size compared to the likes of Carol the Carcharodontosaurus shouldn't make you believe that she's not dangerous. So he won't go in her enclosure, but he will go and talk to her. She's happy to talk to him. But he knows that if he goes in there, chances are she'll want to play rough with him, maybe bite him, so... Add a few. Most of these dinosaurs are drawn from memory, but some of these sketches, I will go online and look at some skulls, just to update the sizes of certain parts and give them a few finishing touches that might be missing. But the general idea of these dinosaurs are, I capture the likeness of certain features so that they're easy to identify. So in the case of the ankylosaurs, they've got their big spiny back, you know, plated backs with the spines, tiny spikes on them, and a big club tail. But the head, I could not remember how their heads looked, so I drew a generic stegosaur style head, so it didn't have any spikes around the actual head, until I decided, oh, I'll look online now that I've got the basic sketch finished. And then I saw that they have some little spikes around their head, so I thought, oh, okay, just quickly add those in. Whereas Stacy's Styracosaurus, I know what a Styracosaurus looks like. I really like my Ceratopsians, so just drew her as she was. I double checked anyway, but I was perfectly fine with her, so I didn't have to worry. Spencer the Spinosaurus was quite interesting because we had the original design for him was based on the concept that we were familiar with at the time, which was like the Jurassic Park style, where they stood upright with a perfectly round sail, and then came the news that actually they kind of crawled on their knuckles and their spine had a bit of a dip halfway, and maybe had a fin like thing on the end of their tail. So I thought, okay, I'll just redraw him in the style, and it worked fine. So the style for Spencer is the latest discovery based for a Spinosaurus. So he required quite a lot of research. I mean, I've got Jurassic Park themed Spinosaurs in my room. I'm hoping to have a more up-to-date version soon in my room. Whereas Diana, the Dilophosaurus, I really like Dilophosaurs, but I really cannot remember how to draw them. So I was quite lucky that in my room I have a Papo or Papo Dilophosaurus model. So I use this as a bit of a guide just to get certain features of her. So she has a few spikes down the back of her head based on the model as well, because I quite like this model. But Alan the Allosaurus was drawn from memory, but I do also have an Allosaurus model that I based on him slightly. So he has a few spikes down his head and a few down just in between his hips on his back. So he has a few traits from the model I have in my room, but overall I drew him from memory. It's like this iguanodon at the moment. I'm drawing from memory, and I will be looking online at the moment on my phone in a moment to just make sure that everything tallies up okay. Usually it does. Usually tallies up fine. Sketching process doesn't take very long usually. It's mainly finding the researching and thinking of a pose that takes the time that I need to make a finished image from this sketch. So put a few little markings in here just to define that she is scaled. I've already identified this iguanodon as a female, so I think I will make them a female. Platings down the back, like so. So, now that I've finished all the sketches, I'm going to just quickly go on my phone and I'm going to look online at how an iguanodon actually looks. Now, it probably would have been best if I did this before I started sketching, but I like to just get down and start doing it. So, iguanodon. So, now I'm going to just basically open up a typical image that I find online. Yeah. So, I've just found one online. That's how an iguanodon looks on this artwork that I found, and when I compare her to the example I just found, I don't think it's too bad. I don't think we really need to change that. She still has that generic iguanodon style look. I just need to change one finger to split up a bit. So I'll just erase this little digit, and then I will draw in where it should actually go, so it splits off a little bit. So they're very strange animals when I come to think about it with the iguanodon, because their fingers just do not meet like how they should. And I'm also noticing she has she's missing a finger on each hand, so I'll just add that in. And I can make this digit a bit smaller, because in the pictures of the iguanodons that I'm looking at, it seems the outermost finger is smaller anyway, because these spikes, they're not actually a finger at all from the looks of it. It's actually just a spike on the actual hand. So that will do for the iguanodon. So I'll close that. I don't need my phone anymore, so I'll just pop it to one side. Right, so the next part of what I do, after doing all these sketches, is I would like to add more sketches in between these, pieces of white, but I'll come and do that later. What I do next is I start to do some inking. Now, I can do inking in lots of different ways. I have different pens for different purposes. I'm going to actually use up one of these spaces of white to show different styles of pen. So what I use for these images for Dinosaur, I like to make sure they're nice and bold, so I use a fine liner. Whereas my comic work and some of my poster work, I like to use an actual manga pen. So I'll show what the manga pen looks like. It's a fountain based pen. It uses black ink cartridges which are replaceable, and basically if I start doing this, apply a bit more pressure and a bit more, I haven't used this pen today, so it's taking its time to fill up with ink. But you can already see the first piece of line that I started is very thin. It's very hard to notice on this camera, I'm afraid, but it's a very thin line, and as I apply more pressure, more ink comes out and it becomes a lot thicker, which is why I like to use this for my comics and major projects. Dinosaur, being a children's book, needs to look more bold, so I like to use my fine liners. Now, it takes me a moment to find the right fine liners I need. We'll start with this one. 0.1 is a very thin nib. It's probably too thin to see on this camera, so this produces the same type of line as very gentle presses do for fountain pen. And then I usually use a 0.5, which is much thicker. So you can see a little bit more thick nib at the end. And this produces the same type of thickness as full pressure on the fountain pen. And for larger sketches, so it won't be used on these ones because they're too small, is a number 1, which is a very thick nib, and you'll see in a moment doesn't seem to be much difference there, but it really is. It's a much thicker stroke of pen. So I won't be using the number 1. I have pens that go bigger and I have pens that go smaller. I have one that I believe is 0.01, if I can find it. These are my brushes. 0.03, 0.05, 0.3, that's the 1, 0.8, it's in here somewhere, unless it was the 0.05 I was thinking of. I'll have to have a double check. Or the 0.03, I was sure I had a 0.01, but it must have gone walkies. So, let's start with a 0.05. This is an extremely fine nib. Even I struggle to see this nib on the end of the pen, and it is so fine. I mean, I made it look thicker by going over it twice, because it just really is so fine. And then the 0.03 is even smaller. It is extremely tiny. It's almost the size of a mechanical pencil lead. Very fine. Now, I don't really use them this small. I might use them in the future for some projects. But at the moment, I usually stick to number 1, 0.5, or 0.1. So, we'll start inking in a moment. They're the 2 pens I need. And I'll just mention that the pens that I use are Copic markers, fine liners, and then the fountain pen is a School G brand manga pen, and these are Japanese. All these pens and pencils I'm using are Japanese made, so you can buy them on tokuhands.com or .jp, depends where you're buying them from, but they do international deliveries as well. And the mechanical pencil I use is also Japanese. It's a Zebra Delgard, and the one that I use, it's very hard to make out with this camera. Don't think it's showing up on there, but it's called a Delgard 0.5, and they use replacement lead cartridges, and you can get them in HB or higher. I usually stick to HB or 2B for very soft sketches, and these are the ink cartridges that I used for the fountain. So now the sketches are all done, I don't need this. I'll pop it over here, and we'll start doing some inking. Now this process usually takes the longest, and it's not the most interesting thing to watch, but we'll soon start. So I'm starting with a 0.5, and I'll just do all the outline work. Finer details with a small pen. can already see how much it's standing out. I mean, I've not finished doing the inking on these characters, but basically it makes them pop, and once I've finished inking them, I'll be erasing all the sketch work on it, so that it's a nice clean image for whoever decides they want the original sketch. And it also makes it easier for me to edit for the colouring process. So absolutely every picture that's been showing on screen has been done this way. They start out as this, as a raw sketch that goes through inking process, scanning in, cleaning up, and then finally colouring, polishing, and uploaded onto the website. So it's a very painstaking process, but it's also extremely relaxing, especially when you just whack the radio on, or even a YouTube video for that matter. I've listened to a bunch of different YouTube videos in the background. Now and again it's good, even though I'm in a nice posture here, using a drafting table rather than hunched down like I used to be, which was bad for my back. Using a drafting table has made my posture a lot better. I still think it's best to just pop the pen down for a minute, turn to the screen if I have a computer on, and basically just watch a YouTube video now and again. Or if I really want to, I can push this back, turn around, and play on the PlayStation for a few minutes. So that's if I just want to be lazy and stay sat down. I mean, I can get up and do other things as well. It's just good to have a little break now and again. And as Bob Ross says, or did say, there are no mistakes, only happy accidents. Because I made a happy accident just now. I've made it work into the actual picture. So, you can already see some of the detail is starting to appear. I mean, I could see it, but on the screen it's not quite so obvious. So thankfully Andy and Anna, the ankylosauruses, they're not too detailed. They don't have very fine details on them because they're quite frumpy, large animals. Whereas Spencer, the Spinosaurus, and Dinah, the Dilophosaurus, have quite fine teeth details. So I'll actually end up switching between the two pens to do those details, just so that I don't waste everyone's time. I'll finish Andy and Anna, and then I'll move on to doing one of those two predators that require the change in pens, just so you can have a rough idea of what that looks like. And you can also achieve some of the same effects of you know the same kind of effects as you would have by switching pens, just by holding a larger nib pen with more delicacy. So I've been doing that here with Andy and Anna. I just brushing it very gently over the surface. There we go. So, I am sorry again about the quality of the footage and the angle that it is at, but the webcam that I've got only does 720, I think it's 720p, 60 FPS, and the cable that it's on is extremely short, so it can't get too far from my computer. Andy drawn. Now to do Anna. I've even had to shut some of my blinds to stop the glare on the camera. I do prefer working in very natural, well lit environments. So it makes a difference inking this way. I prefer doing it this way than on a computer because you get the natural flow of how a sketch actually looks as well. So the problem I have with taking a sketch and then scanning it in and then inking it digitally, it just looks a bit too pure for my liking, whereas doing it this way leaves a personal touch, because if I have a tremor in my hand suddenly, or if I tense up suddenly, the line might deviate, even just slightly. It might deviate a tiny bit, not in a way that ruins the picture, but it just makes it feel a little bit more human, and you don't really get that with digital, I believe. I still prefer colouring digitally because I don't have the confidence to actually colour digitally. I don't have the confidence. I don't have the confidence to not colour digitally. Almost finished inking these two characters. Add Anna's club. There we go. So that's Anna and Andy done. And then what I like to do, the ink usually dries a lot faster, but usually I leave them to set for a few minutes and move on to another picture, and then when that picture's inked I like to erase them, but I'm going to try and erase it now. And so what I like to do, just to test it, is to blow on it a few times and press my finger against it, not smudge it, just press my finger against it, lift it up, and if my finger's clean it's safe to erase. which is now ready for the scanning and the inking. Oh wait, no, it's already inked. My bad. It's ready for scanning and colouring. The rest of these all need inking. So like I said, I'm going to move on to inking one of the predatory dinosaurs. And because Alan is at the bottom on his own, I'll leave him for now. I'll go for... I think I will go for Diana, because I've already done a picture recently of Spencer. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to just go around the bulk detail. Just the bits that don't require a fine and delicate touch. Now I'm onto the fine nib, so I can do her teeth. Because the image is so small, it just needs that delicate little touch just for those very, very tiny details. To keep it consistent, I have to make sure I do the jaw as close as the jaw is to these teeth. I have to make sure the jaw thickness is the same as the rest of the body. So I have to go back to using the thicker nib and just be extremely cautious with it. So I've reached the point here where I will need to switch the pen again, because her claws, whilst they're quite large on this hand because they're just flat, on this hand because she's like, oh, pointing, I'm going to have to make the claws a little bit thinner. Now I can make it still look quite thick by going around it again with the fine pen, but it just makes it a little bit safer than just going over it with a thicker pen. So I've given the impression that the this set of claws were drawn in this thickness, when actually I just used this one and just went over it twice. And no one will be any the wiser other than the people who have watched this video. Okay. Now we're moving on in a moment. So now I'm moving on to the little spikes that are just running down her back, and I'm going to go over those with a thinner pen just to make them stand out a little bit more. It's not very thick, because when you have everything the same thickness it kind of just doesn't look interesting, I don't think. I think it's nice to spice things up a bit, but add a bit of diversity. Just when I get to these very small spikes, it would be very tricky. And now onto the final bit for Diana, at least, is her crest. Now I know it's not obvious because of where I have the camera, but I sometimes have to come from above and do broad strokes. There we go. So now that she is inked, same process again. Quick tap. The ink is dry. And then we just erase the pencil marks. Now compared to some of the other dinosaurs I've drawn on here, she doesn't actually have any detail on her skin, so I'm going to add just a few little circle-like markings to define scales. Just a few, not too many, because this is only a small picture. And then what I do after this process is done for the rest of these images is they will get scanned in, and they will be polished up, cleaned up, and then coloured. So you can see other videos of how that process is done on the YouTube channel, and you can see the final pieces of work when they are finished, uploaded onto the Redbubble store or directly onto my website at www.ZuW.com. And I hope to release more videos in the near future.